Hi, you may or may not know that a couple weeks ago I posted a video about how I've been carnivore for a year and a half and that I've been gaining weight. The thing is, that was definitely one of my most popular videos, and it's got over 1,000 comments, lots of questions, lots of things that you guys brought up. So I want to make this video just to go over your comments and questions. If you're new here, thank you so much for being here. My name is Jen, and I am delighted to meet you. If you're not new, thanks for coming back. I'm always happy to have you, and I'm so glad to get to chat with you today. If you didn't catch that original video, I will put a link to it in the description, and I'll also link to it at the end of this video if you want to go back and watch. But we will touch on a lot of the topics of that video in this video today. Basically, what I said in that other video is that going on the carnivore diet is the best thing I've ever done for myself. I love it. I think that it's a really great choice for a lot of people, and I've had really great healing on it. But I have not been losing weight. In fact, the opposite. I did lose a little bit of weight at first. I lost about 10 pounds or so in the first few months. And then I just sort of maintained for a few months, but I felt like $1,000,000, so I didn't care. But since then, basically for about the last 9 months, I've been slowly and steadily gaining weight. That's what I said in that other video. Now, let's get into what you guys asked about. Now, a lot of people asked a lot of the same questions. So I'm going to put the questions up here on the screen, but know that most of them are not word for word, okay? They're just kind of capturing the general gist. So one of the most common questions was, what exactly do you eat and how much do you eat? That's difficult to say because I wasn't tracking every single day for the last year and a half, and I was trying different things, especially at about the 9-month mark when I was like, okay, I want to start losing a little weight. I started changing things. But I want to give you just an example day of what I would eat. By the way, I've got all the questions here on my iPad and some of my answers so that I don't miss anything. So on an average day, I'm guessing I would eat about 2,500 calories. Now, I know that sounds like kind of a lot, but I'm pretty active too. I have a very active job and I'm also very consistent with exercise. So I burn at least 700 calories a day through exercise and activity. So to me, 2,500 calories doesn't seem like that much. I know you might have a different opinion, but in my opinion, it seems about right. So a typical day might be 4 eggs and 3 slices of bacon for breakfast with a tablespoon of butter for cooking, half a pound of ground beef and a couple ounces of beef fat for lunch, and then like a 12-ounce ribeye. So that day would have been about 170 grams of protein, 195 grams of fat, and about 72-ish% fat. That was a very typical day for me. Now, I did some other things here and there, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But just in general, especially for the first handful of months, I really just ate meat, didn't track anything, ate till I was full. That was all I did. And so this would have been a very typical day during that time. Now, a lot of people in the comments basically said, you need more fat. That's why you're not losing weight. I know a lot of people seem to just do great with a ton of fat, but right about the time when I started making changes was about September of 2022. Now, I started carnivore in the first place February of 2022. So I guess September, that would have been 7 or 8 months later. I tried doing a high fat diet. That was kind of, remember when it was just a really popular, trendy thing to do high fat. So I was like, okay, I'll try it. And I did lose 5 to 10 pounds in the first couple weeks. I felt great. But that's kind of when my problems started actually. And I'm not blaming it on a high fat diet, but I will say that the timing certainly coincides. So for a couple of months, I was tracking my food and I was purposely keeping protein a little bit low, keeping fat pretty high. I was generally eating 2 to 3 meals a day during that time and getting 80 to 85% of my calories from fat. Most of my fat would come from beef fat trimmings because that's my favorite kind of fat, but also butter, egg yolks, things like that. Now, during that time, I was measuring my ketones and my blood glucose, and that was when I was still feeling really good. My weight had plateaued for a while, but I was feeling really good. And I also was saying to myself, hey, if I stay this weight forever, I will be perfectly happy. I don't need to lose weight. My psoriasis is healed. I'm feeling great. But around that time, I was measuring ketones and they were getting pretty high, like 1, 1.5, 2 sometimes. My blood glucose was often very low when I'd wake up in the morning, something like 50, mid 50s, low 60s on the high days. And I felt like it was fine. I was like, I'm completely asymptomatic. It's fine that my blood sugar's so low. I wasn't sleeping very much. I would sleep okay, but then I'd wake up at 3 a.m., maybe completely awake and ready to go for the day, and kind of feeling like, yes, this is awesome. I am going to be so much more productive now. I'm getting time back in my life. Carnivores just don't need as much sleep. This is wonderful. Okay, so this is back in September when I did the high fat diet. So to answer the question, I have done a high fat diet. And that's when I started noticing these couple little things. Okay, so we'll circle back to this a little bit. Now, on the other hand, many of you said you've got to cut the fat. You're eating too much fat, so you can't burn your own fat. I've tried this too. In early 2023, earlier this year, in the winter, I basically did Maria Emmerich's plan. Not protein sparing modified fasting exactly, but she kind of has a basic plan where based on your age, height, weight, all that, they sort of spit out what your macros should be. And it's pretty low calorie and it's low fat. So for a couple of weeks, I was sticking to this hardcore. I had to keep fat at 85 grams or less per day, and my calories per day were like 13 to 1400 calories. Again, in like a week, I lost 6-7 pounds, felt like I was on the right track. But after about 10 days, I was exhausted, completely wiped. I could barely get my workouts done. And, you know, I work out consistently. So it was very obvious to me that with the workout I was trying to do that day, like I could do it a week prior. This day, I could not even do close to the amount of weight. I could barely get through the workout. I was just so exhausted. And so it was very clear to me that that amount of cutting calories and cutting fat was not an option, a long-term option. I ended up just, you know, being really hungry and fatigued and having to eat a bunch for a few days just to kind of get my energy reserves back. So for those of you who say, decrease the fat, done that too. Now, I know that that was a big decrease. So I've tried some other things, not quite as big of a decrease. And I feel like I just keep saying this, but we'll circle back to that. Now, some people, including some that I really, really respect, like Dr. Berry, say you should not have to track anything. Just eat animal products, eat until you're full. In fact, eat until you're comfortably stuffed. If you do that, you will absolutely lose weight, or at least like achieve your optimal body weight. I've done that. That's what I've done the most, right? I did that for my first 5 or 6 months as a carnivore. And then I've done that for the last several months. And that has not worked for me. And somebody commented something that I think is so poignant and appropriate and exactly how I feel. And I think a lot of you do too. I want to actually read it to you. Okay, this was a man named Gregory Bowyer. And he said, when I eat 1 pound of ribeye and 3 eggs per day, I lose weight. When I eat 2 pounds of ribeye and 7 eggs per day, I gain weight. I'm never hungry either way. So obviously, if you're eating less, you're losing weight. If you're eating more, you're gaining weight. But what he said that I found so interesting and really I felt it in my soul is I'm not hungry either way. And that's the thing. Now, when I told you when I cut calories a bunch and I cut fat a bunch, I wasn't necessarily hungry. I was just so fatigued. But in general, hunger is not a good measure for me to know how much I should be eating because I could easily eat 2 pounds of meat per day or 4 pounds of meat per day and feel pretty much the same hunger wise, regardless. So I don't know. I don't know if it's like leptin resistance or some people are just broken with their hunger signals. Now, I personally have had a lifetime of binge eating disorder ahead, you know, before all of carnivore. So I don't know if that's the thing, but I know I'm not the only one. Obviously, Gregory is in this with me, and I know so many of you are as well. A lot of people said it comes down to calories in, calories out, just cut the calories, whatever you're eating, eat half of that. I hear you. I believe if I did all that, I would lose weight. And in my experience, when I cut calories, I lose weight. But here's the thing, you've got to be able to stick to it. If it's something that maybe you can do for a week and then you're too fatigued, you can't get through your workouts, you're just craving food all the time, and then you end up overeating, that is not a good plan, at least not for me. And maybe I just don't have the discipline that some people have to restrict every single day. I don't know. But just simply cutting calories has not worked for me in the past. And I mentioned that I did the Maria Emmerich thing where I super decreased my calories and I super decreased my fat. Well, after that, I realized that was way too much of a cut. So instead, I tried to do something that was more like about 2,000 calories a day of food and trying to target 65 to 70% of my food from fat. So not really low fat, but not high fat either. And I did feel pretty good that way. But I still just felt restricted, like, well, I'm not allowed to have this because I've gone over my calories or, so I would just find that I wasn't binging after, but I would kind of rebound and just rebel and not want to eat what I was supposed to eat and want to just have more steak than I was supposed to. Just, I don't know. I still have a little bit of that mental health stuff going on, I guess. Now, along these lines with calories and macros and all that, a lot of people in the comments on that video said, if you're eating too much protein, it's converted to glucose, it'll increase your blood sugar and it'll increase your insulin. And so you can't lose weight. I've heard this a lot. I believed it at one point, but I certainly don't believe it for myself, especially now. Remember I told you when I was doing the high fat thing and I was checking glucose and ketones, that was with a finger stick glucometer from ForAcare. I'll link that in the description if you guys are interested. But I was finding my blood sugar to be quite low. And one of my friends who's not carnivore was like, something a little too low. And I just was like, no, I'm asymptomatic, it's fine. And I do think that if you're completely asymptomatic and your blood sugar is like 60 most of the time, it's not that big of a deal. But I'm not asymptomatic. I'm not sleeping through the night and I'm gaining weight. I would say that's symptomatic. So I recently got a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. I've been wearing it now for about 3 weeks. And so now I've gotten a lot of really great data. And so I want to share some of that with you to kind of highlight some of these comments we've already gone over and some more that are to come. Now I've got to look on my iPad so I can see what I'm talking about, but you're going to see it on the screen. So the first day that I had my CGM was September 3rd, and you can see overnight around 1 or 2 a.m., my blood glucose dropped super low, almost to 40. So I can almost guarantee what happened is my blood sugar got really low, my adrenals released cortisol to bring my blood sugar up. I wake up wide awake at whatever time, probably 3 a.m., ready to go, feeling good. But I think having cortisol all the time is not only not letting me sleep through the night, but is ultimately what has made me gain weight over the last 9 months. So let's go on to September 4th. Same thing basically happened the next day. Now, this was before I had added anything to my diet. I was still just eating meat, okay? So September 4th, the drop wasn't quite as drastic, but it was still into the 40s. And by the way, my CGM was calibrated, so I believe that this data is accurate. Then the third day, September 5th, later in that day is when I started adding a little bit of plant foods, which we'll discuss a little bit more in a moment. But you can see I was still having quite a few lows. I didn't have quite as big of a dip, but I did have one around 3:30 a.m. Now, let's fast forward to now. I've been working on this for a couple weeks, and I'll actually film a whole video for you about what I've learned from having this CGM and what I've changed and kind of what I've been adding to my diet. But I just want to show you what my blood sugar is looking like now. So September 20th, which was yesterday, you can see I did not have a huge drop in the middle of the night. And my blood sugar stayed pretty steady all day between about 70 and 100 all day. Now this was eating some plant foods too. So that's why the higher highs, but I'm not getting those low lows, which I think is really key for me. And then today, the day's not over, so my graph is not over, but you can see again, overnight, I did not have that huge drop. So I think I'm on the right track. I mean, many of you may not agree with this, and I don't think this is necessarily true for everyone, but I think there's so much value in objective data. I'm so glad I got a DEXA scan. I'm so glad I've got this CGM data. I'm so glad I've been tracking my food solidly for a month, but before that, on and off, tracking glucose and ketones, tracking workouts, tracking all of these things so I can look back and see, okay, when I do this, this happens. When I do this, this happens. And then when people are trying to guide me, which I know most of you have the best intentions, I can say, thank you for that advice, but that doesn't seem to be what's happening to me. When I eat too much protein, I don't seem to be having an issue with too much glucose and an insulin spike. But let's talk about that for a moment. So I know that I have some liver damage because I was on an immunosuppressant for a couple years for my psoriasis before I was a carnivore. And my latest lab tests, which were back in April of this year, just a few months ago, show that my liver enzymes were a little bit better than they were when it was previously tested before carnivore, but they're still not great. So for gluconeogenesis to happen, where excess protein is turned into glucose, that happens in the liver. I don't know this to be a fact, but I think it's reasonable to believe that if my liver is not able to create as much glucose as it would need to raise my blood sugar, that might be why this is happening. I don't know for sure, but certainly something that I'm going to keep in mind. Okay, that was a lot. Let's get back a little bit to the comments. So many of you said you've got to cut out the dairy. You're eating way too much cheese and milk and all those dairy things, and that's why you can't lose weight. I did that from January to probably May. I didn't have any dairy, no milk, no yogurt, no cottage cheese, no butter even. I didn't have butter for months. So that didn't help. I was still gaining weight that whole time. I was still experiencing all these symptoms. So now I have since added back dairy, and it doesn't seem to be hurting me, and I like my life better with dairy in it. So I don't see any reason to cut it out. And I've actually recently added raw milk. I'm having it every day. And I'll make another video about this because this is way more than we have time to talk about right now. But I think it's incredible. I honestly feel like it's healing me in many ways. So we'll discuss that in the future, but I definitely don't want to cut that out right now. Now, some of you said, do meat, salt, and water only. So Lion Diet. Done it. I did it for about 5 weeks in January of 2023, earlier this year for World Carnivore Month. I did the Lion Diet, and I felt good, but that's a time when I was finding that my ketones were getting higher, my blood glucose was getting lower. I was not losing weight. I was not sleeping well. I loved the food. It was great, but that didn't do it for me. And, people believe it so much. They're like, do it for 30 days and you 100% will lose weight. Sorry, that's not what happened for me. A lot of people say you should be fasting, some kind of fasting, whether it's intermittent fasting of skipping breakfast or skipping dinner, or doing OMAD, or doing alternate day fasting, or doing 48-hour fast, or doing up to 10-hour fast. You've got to do fasting in addition to carnivore to get all the benefits. Okay, I have a lot of thoughts on that, and this will be the third time I've said this in this video, but I want to make a whole video about this, about why I don't fast. But I will say I have tried it. I have tried intermittent fasting quite a bit. My longest fast was 24 hours. That's as much as I've done, but it does not feel like a good fit for me. And also, in light of what I'm telling you with my blood sugars, that doesn't seem like a good idea to me. If my blood sugars are chronically low and I'm having all these cortisol spikes, I honestly feel like fasting harder and fasting more is only going to make that worse. Also, just in my spirit, it does not feel like fasting is the thing I should do. And I think there's some value to that. You really got to take that into account when deciding what you want to do with your diet. And I think, however I'm going to lose weight, it's got to be a way that I'm going to continue to live. And I'm not going to do alternate day fasting consistently. And I'm certainly not going to do sardine fasts. A lot of people recommended that, reset the metabolism, drop a few pounds. It doesn't matter to me if I can lose 5 pounds in 3 days by only eating sardines, if I'm then going to gain it all back. And I'm certainly not going to stick with only eating sardines. So I value the responses about fasting, and I know it's a great tool for so many people. But for me, with my history of binge eating, my sort of rebellion against feeling restricted, my basically hypoglycemia, what I think is cortisol stuff going on, I just don't think it's a good idea for me, though I have tried it a little bit and it's not been a good fit. So I hate that you might be like, I'm telling her she needs to fast, and she's like, I can't lose weight and I ain't gonna fast. It just seems a little bit maybe like, well, I can't help her then. That's how I feel that you might feel, right? I'm just being too sensitive about what you might think, but I don't think it's a good fit for me. Now, here's another very common comment I got. Give it some time. Your body prioritizes healing first. Or Even Kelly Hogan gained weight at first. And then look at her. She's like the epitome of thinness on a carnivore diet. And I agree with those things. But in my case, it's not like I did the carnivore diet and I just didn't ever lose weight, or I just slowly started gaining weight. But I lost weight at first, then I maintained it for a while, then I've been slowly gaining. That does not seem to me like something that you should just ignore. And I agree, like the healing, yes, it takes top priority. I had that. My psoriasis is so much better. I've gotten off all my medications, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm not at all having any regrets about doing this diet, but I'm just saying, it seems to me like when something starts to change and it's negatively affecting you, like for me, not sleeping well, gaining weight, it feels like something worth looking into changing, right? Like I could just keep doing this for 2 or 3 more years, but that doesn't feel like the right thing to do. So I do agree that in the beginning you've got to be patient, especially the first couple months when your body's just adjusting. But I'm way past that, so I feel like that no longer applies to me. Here's a big one. I got this a couple of times, and I'm not really offended, right? Like I know that what I'm telling you is true, so whatever, I couldn't care less what strangers think. But a couple people said something along the lines of, you're either doing something wrong or you're not being honest. There are no other explanations. Now, let's start with the doing something wrong. Clearly, I'm doing something wrong for my body, but I don't think that that's necessarily something wrong per all the carnivores, right? Like, if you think you've got to fast, then yeah, I'm doing something wrong. I'm not fasting. If you think that I've got to not include dairy, then yeah, I'm doing something wrong. But if what you think is right is what I think is right, which is eat any animal product, eat until you're comfortably full, like you shouldn't really have to track anything. Basically, what Dr. Berry says, if that's what's right, I've been doing that. And as far as the cheating, I have not cheated in a year and a half, one time with one exception. One exception. In June of 2022, I had one glass of wine on a date. So I'd been carnivore at that time for 5 months, 4 months, something like that. I was feeling great. I had one glass of wine at a restaurant, and I was like, this isn't even that good, and it's really expensive. And I wasn't even paying, it was a date. But I haven't drank since because it's like, it's not even that appealing to me, and I certainly don't want to pay for it with my own money. So other than that, I did not have any chewing gum, any mints, any candy, any cheat meals. I basically only use salt for seasoning. Now, on occasion, if I went to a restaurant and they put other seasoning on my food, I would eat it. But I did not cheat at all. So for those of you who are like, if this person's not losing weight, they're definitely lying about what they're eating, I'm telling you, that is not true. Whether or not you believe me, don't care. Here's another one that I find very interesting, because I do hear people say a lot, if you're not eating enough, you can't lose weight. Your body goes into starvation mode and da 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 da. And I kind of agree with this comment this person said, which is something along the lines of, people in concentration camps always lose weight, or like people on Survivor always lose weight. And that's true. And I think because their calories are so extremely decreased that of course they're just wasting away. They're losing all their muscle. They're just wasting away. They're losing all their fat too. And so I agree. If you cut calories enough, you will absolutely lose weight. But I don't want to be in this race to the bottom where I just decrease my calories as much as I possibly can to lose weight, and then either be miserable to maintain it or completely wreck my metabolism to where I can't increase calories to a normal livable amount without gaining weight. So I honestly believe there's got to be a way where I can eat a reasonably normal amount of calories, which to me is something like 2,000 calories a day, maybe a little more if you're more active, and still lose weight slowly and then be able to maintain an optimal body weight. So that's just my opinion. Take it or leave it. Now, a lot of you are so sweet and just positive thinking and saying, girl, you definitely are just gaining muscle and bone density. And that's what happens when you eat all this nutrient dense food. But I knew already that that wasn't the case. I could tell by the way I was feeling, the way my clothes were fitting. I knew I was gaining fat. So just a couple of weeks ago, I got a DEXA scan, which I got one in January as well. So I had this one to compare. I literally went and paid the $65 just so I could prove to you guys that this was not just muscle, this was definitely fat. And so I'll put my results up here for you. But I got the first DEXA scan January 6th and the second one August 30th. You can see between the two, I gained 10 pounds. And I did gain 2 pounds of muscle, but the other 8 pounds were fat. My bone density actually stayed exactly the same, which my bone density is really good, and I'm really pleased with that. But I definitely put on fat. So I think it's good to be optimistic and think, well, I'm gaining weight, but it's surely just lean body mass and bone density. Just really, if you're feeling awesome and your clothes are fitting well and you're losing inches, that's probably true. But if not, if your clothes are fitting the same or worse, I don't know that I would work too hard to convince yourself that this is a good thing, because at least in my case, it was not. Now, speaking of muscle and everything, many of you wanted to talk about workouts, and specifically, a lot of you said, stop doing cardio, it increases your cortisol. Well, rest assured, I hardly do any cardio anyway. I'm very consistent with my exercise, but that's mostly weightlifting. I usually lift 3 to 5 days a week, and then I usually walk like every day for 30 to 60 minutes a day, sometimes multiple times, but it's never like hardcore steady state cardio. On occasion, I'll do some jogging or ride my bike a long way. And I recently got into jump rope, so I have been doing a little more. But in general, I don't do a lot of cardio anyway. And I know a lot of you are suggesting Sean O'Mara's recommendation of sprinting, and I am going to get into that, but I haven't yet. And I actually recently had an ankle injury, so that's giving me more of an excuse to put that off. But I do think there's probably some value in that, and I will do it, and I will report back. But just know that in general, I'm not doing so much cardio that it's hindering my weight loss. That is for sure. Now, let's get back to the topic of sleep. So I mentioned in my previous video that sometimes I have trouble falling asleep, but what happens more often is I wake up around 3 a.m., 2:30 or 3, wide awake, not necessarily tired, but just wired and cannot sleep anymore. And for a long time, I thought, this is wonderful. The carnivore diet has cured me of needing sleep. I just have hours in my day back. And I'm just really beginning to second guess that. Here's actually what one person said. They said, lots of people sleep less on a carnivore diet. It's normal. We don't need as much sleep because we sleep more deeply. I had convinced myself of that too. And honestly, if my only issue that I was having was sleep, I probably would think everything was fine. Also, if my only issue that I was having was weight gain, I probably still would be like, it's all fine. Like, I'm fine at this weight. But because I'm having both and I feel that they're interconnected, I just really want to get to the bottom of this. And I recently read a book by Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep. He is the foremost expert on sleep science. I am not an expert on this topic, but I want to read it again, basically go through highlights and then, hey, make a video about this. There's our fourth time I'm going to make a new video. But I promise you, based on what I read from him, that he would disagree. Just because we're eating an optimal diet on a carnivore diet, that does not mean we need less sleep. Cutting off the end of your sleep cuts off a lot of the valuable REM sleep, actually. So you might be getting all the deep sleep you need, but you're losing some of the REM sleep. Anyway, I just no longer believe that that's appropriate, that we just don't need as much sleep. We'll see how it pans out. And I'll discuss more of this with you in the future. Okay, let's get into hormones and stuff. So a lot of you asked if I've had my thyroid checked. And I have. I had it in April of 2023, about 5 months ago. And my TSH was 2.32, which is normal. My free T4 was 1.15, also normal. My free T3 was 2.1, which is normal, but on the low end. And let's reverse T3, we didn't test. I wish we would have, but we didn't. I'm actually getting labs done again, most likely tomorrow. So I'll have this comparison, and I'll also get the reverse T3 done. But I will say, with the free T3, that was a little bit on the low end of normal. I looked back at old labs from a couple years ago, and it was basically the same. And I wasn't having any trouble with weight loss then. So I don't believe that this has to do with thyroid. On that note, though, some of you asked if I've taken iodine, because it does help to support the thyroid. And I did recently start taking that about a month ago. So we'll see if that helps at all. Several of you said this could be due to perimenopause. I hope not, because I'm 39, but I still want to have a baby. I don't have any kids. I'm in a relationship, but I don't know. We'll see how long it takes to get to the point where we would be married and it'd be appropriate to have a baby. So the pressure's on a little bit, but I'm really, really hopeful that it's not perimenopause. But to the many, many of you who asked, have I had my hormones checked? The answer is no, I have not. I'm going to, though. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to have a Dutch test, which actually measures cortisol, but it also looks at a bunch of different sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone and all that good stuff. I'm working with my friend Jen Winkler, Coach Jen Winkler on Instagram. And so she's helping me to kind of walk through all this, work through it, and get labs ordered and stuff like that. So I'll share that information once I get it. Another question is, have you had your fasting insulin checked? And the answer is yes. In April, it was 3.3, which is normal on the low end, actually. So I don't think there's any issues with insulin either. Okay, so like I mentioned, I recently started trying the Lugol's iodine. I just put 2 drops of it a day in my coffee. Now, if any of you were like, well, coffee, that's why you can't lose weight. I've cut that out for months at a time too. My life is just better with coffee in it. So I include it. Another question, have you tried myo-inosotol for sleep? Yes, I have. I took it for about 4 months and I did not notice any difference. So I just ran out about a week ago and I'm not going to buy any more. Have you been using electrolytes? Yes, religiously, because the other issue that I've had that I've shared many, many times during my 1.5 years carnivore is cramps in my legs at night. That's sometimes what wakes me up. Usually when I wake up wide awake at like 3 a.m., it's not cramps. It's more like if I'm able to sleep later, I wake up with just a terrible Charlie horse in my calf. And the only thing I can do to get rid of it is to get up and stand on it. That has been a very, very consistent thing for me as a carnivore. No matter what I do, supplementing magnesium and calcium and doing magnesium soaks and taking multiple servings of electrolytes every day, like it just has been a consistent issue. Another question, have you looked into mold toxicity? I haven't. I feel like this all really started about 9 months ago, and I've been living in the same apartment for about 3 years. So I don't think there's really been a change in my environment. I don't know if I should say this part because I don't want to offend anybody, okay? But I also feel like that's kind of just the new thing, that it's like the catch-all. And so I don't want to go down that route right now. If I'm looking into all this other stuff and nothing results, then maybe I would consider that. But I just don't feel like that's the direction I need to head in. Several of you said to look into Sarah Kleiner and her circadian rhythms. I do follow her on Instagram. I've not done any of her paid programs or anything, but I have been trying to implement some of those things. For the last month or so, I've been trying to wake up and go for a walk with the sunrise, trying to limit my blue light exposure in the evening. I've kind of been grounding a couple days a week, walking on the grass for a couple of minutes. That's about it. But I'm just starting to get there. So I'm just a little baby circadian rhythm studier, but I will definitely try to incorporate more of that into my life because I do believe there's value there. Here's an interesting one. One person said breast implants could be causing this. Now, I personally don't have breast implants, so that's not my issue. But I do think that's a valuable thing for people to know. If you're having weird health stuff, whether it's weight gain or sleep issues or whatever the thing, and you're doing all this testing and you cannot get to the bottom of it, I understand from women with breast implants that that could be part of breast implant illness and you may need explanted. So just keep that in mind. Okay, now we're getting into the juicy stuff. So many of you said, why do you think adding carbs is going to help? This makes no sense to me because in my previous video, I said, these are the things that are going on. This is what I'm noticing. My plan is to get this continuous glucose monitor and start selectively adding some carbs in. So why do I think that will help? Because specifically of the blood sugars that I was sharing with you, especially the low blood sugars overnight. I think I need to regulate my blood sugar way better than I have been. And you saw in the blood sugar graphs I shared with you that it's improved a lot already. I'm no longer having these huge dips at night. And in general, my blood sugar is just staying still even, but higher during the day. And so it's too early to know if it's helping or not, but I'm feeling good about it. But that's why I think adding some carbs is going to help me specifically. Okay, those are basically all of the comments and questions that I wanted to go over. But I want to just point out that so many of you, probably hundreds of you, were like, this is exactly my situation. I've been experiencing the same thing. I thought I was the only one. I can't tell you how many of you said, I thought I was the only one. So I just want you to know you're not the only one. I don't know why, if all of these people are experiencing this, we're not hearing more about it on social media. It just seems like we only hear the good stuff. And that's awesome because it's so motivating. And if someone is considering trying the carnivore diet, they may not even want to do it if their first exposure is negative. But let me just say, I'm not trying to bash or be negative about the carnivore diet at all. I said already in this video, it's the best thing I've ever done for myself. It's opened so many doors for me to just get healthier and look into this stuff. But I think there's so much value too in paying attention to your symptoms and really optimizing your health, even if that means going against the grain a little bit, going against the grain of our small carnivore community. And so that's what I'm doing. And, making these long videos and recording all these reports and it took me hours to get ready to make this video. But that's why I'm doing it, because not bashing the diet at all, but I just want to help people if they feel like they're stuck and they're the only one. You are not the only one. And I think that we all can figure it out. There's something, if not something to make us just 100% better, there's something we can do to improve whatever symptoms we have. And that may or may not be diet, and it may or may not be carnivore stuff, but there's something. So just keep digging in and researching and also really paying attention to what feels good to you. If it does not feel good to you, don't do it just because someone told you you should do it. Okay, there was my little soapbox speech for the day. So let's wrap up by, I just want to list some things that I've done that have been very, very helpful to me. I kind of wrote them down here. So track as much stuff as you can. If tracking your food is a huge nuisance, don't worry about that. But if you can track from time to time, I think it's really helpful to be able to look back on. But honestly, it's the things that are sort of passively tracked that don't take a lot of your effort that I think are the most useful. So for me, that's been getting DEXA scans sporadically, getting my labs taken every 6 months or so. The CGM has been awesome. It's just shed so much light for me. I am currently tracking every bit of food that I eat because I want to be able to share this stuff with you guys as I'm looking at continuous glucose monitor and losing weight and all that. I want to be able to give you very objective data. So I'm currently tracking all that. But honestly, all tracking my workouts, tracking my poop. I've been tracking my poop for years because I used to be so constipated. So I just have all of this data at my fingertips. It's so helpful. So as much of that as you can automate into your life, the better. Now, I mentioned already there will be several offshoots from this video of things that I will go back and discuss in the future. I'll discuss exactly what I'm finding with my CGM, what foods I'm currently including in my diet, how my weight actually changes, and the rest of my health too. As I'm making these changes, I will share my labs and my hormone work when it comes out soon. I want to do more videos on why I don't think fasting is a great option for me. Those are some of the highlights. So watch for those. They should be coming soon. But in general, I just want to say thank you so much for watching all this. And for anyone who comments on this video, and honestly, that last one too, even if the comment felt a little negative, I really, really value your input. I think so often I read through these comments and I'm like, it's like a light bulb, right? Oh my gosh, they are so onto something. I'm going to try something with that. Or I've tried that. I don't think that really worked. And here's why. It's really helpful for me to be challenged a little bit so that I can then discover why I believe something or not. So please keep those coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll talk soon. If you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe, and check me out on Instagram if you want to connect a little bit more frequently, or let me know in the comments what you might like to see a video about in the future.